tries to engage people in pious activities, giving charity, studying the scriptures, chanting the holy name, performing various kinds of religious ceremonies and sacrifices, because these pious activities will result in sukritina. They become pious, they become fortunate, they become blessed. And the nature of this blessing is that they get the chance to perform devotional service by approaching Krishna. Now in the beginning, their motivation for approaching Krishna is going to be contaminated. Because after all, we're in this material world on account of contaminated material consciousness. So in order of their elevation, these men are the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. The jnani. The jnani knows, the meaning of jnani is one who knows really the reality, that I'm a spirit soul, I'm just riding in this body. I'm not really part of the three modes of material nature, although I'm conscious of them due to the senses of this body. I'm in this body because of my karma, and I can also become transcendental to this body by cultivating transcendental knowledge. This is a jnani. So the Lord favors the jnani because the jnani can actually engage in devotional service. And we see that people who have this kind of knowledge, they stay in devotional service because they are not looking for some temporary material result. I mean, still the Lord gives them whatever facility they need to continue their engagement in His service, but they're not looking for that. That's not their motivation for approaching Krishna. The others, however, are motivated by some material gain, either relief from suffering, or some economic development, or some curiosity. Well, what is this Krishna anyway? How does this whole thing work? What are these people doing? But those people, as soon as they have satisfied their material needs, then they tend to fall away from the process of devotional service, and they don't complete it. Of course, in the next life, because they've made some advancement in spiritual service, they get to pick up the process again and progress further. But still, we see, even though they could attain to pure devotional service and complete liberation in this lifetime, generally they don't. So the motivation or the initial impetus for performing devotional service is very important. Yes, if you're distressed, if you're suffering, as Shakespeare put it, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune here in the material world, then if you come to devotional service, as was discussed in the first chapter of Nectar of Devotion, the first thing that happens is you are relieved from your distress. We're suffering distress in this material world because we are identified with the material body. Therefore, anything that happens to the body, we perceive of that as happening to the self. So because in the material world there are three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and they all have different effects. The mode of goodness results in pleasure, the mode of passion results in distress, and the mode of ignorance is just foolishness and sleep and intoxication. So these three modes are constantly struggling for supremacy, and at different times different modes become prominent. So in this material life we're always going to be just tossed on these waves of the material modes of nature due to the effect of time. Sometimes one will be prominent, sometimes another one. So we're tossed on these waves of happiness and distress. And some days we're up, some days we're down. And we never know, really, which one is going to become prominent. So it's really hard to tell. If you become learned in astrology, of course you can know that. But most people are simply at the effect of these material modes, and so they suffer from distress. Also, people perform impious activities, and so they become thrown into unfortunate situations, such as a lack of wealth, lack of material facilities, a lack of education. These are all different kinds of wealth. Someone may be born in a very prominent, rich, aristocratic merchant or political family. Well, another person is born in a slum tenement or a favela, or you know, I've seen in India where people are living in cardboard boxes and they have kids and everything. So these children born in this unfortunate situation means they perform some impious activity in the past life. And that's manifested in this life as unfortunate birth. But even these people can be rescued from their impecunious situation by performance, even just a small performance of devotional service. We often advise people who have material difficulties to chant the 1,000 names of Vishnu, Vishnu Sahasranam, and that if they actually take our advice, which they sometimes actually do, they can be relieved from this condition. They can become fortunate. They can become elevated. They can get out of their dependent condition in the material world and begin to assert more influence over their own condition and their own future. So this knowledge is coming from the process of devotional service. And finally, there's the inquisitive. People who want to know, what's going on here? How are these people just sitting and chanting this mantra all day? How is it possible? What are they getting out of it? What's motivating them, and so forth? So we direct those people to the Vedic scriptures. And they can look up in the scriptures and find the answers to almost any question, especially those having to do with spiritual things. Everything is revealed in the Vedas. We may not be in a position to realize it, but if we want to know, it's there somewhere, especially in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is amazing. It's like an encyclopedia of all knowledge. And we see great sciences, great arts, just summarized in a line or two, or one or two words. I was a musician before I became a devotee, a composer, and I always wondered, well, how does music affect people emotionally? We all experience that when we hear music, different kinds of music affect us in different ways. There must be a science behind this. There must be some laws, scientific laws of nature that we can understand and use these laws to compose music that would have a particular effect. But when I was studying music, nobody could tell me what these are. There were some vague indications, but nothing as scientific as physics, for example. I studied physics too when I was young. And physics is wonderful because you don't have to memorize anything. If you know math, you can know 3 or 4 equations. I think F equals ma, Maxwell's equations, the laws of thermodynamics, and a couple of others. And if you know those, you can derive the whole of physics just from those simple equations. So I loved that systematic nature of physics. And when I was studying music, there wasn't anything comparable to it. So I was always wondering, how does this thing work? And then one time I asked the right person. I asked Ali Akbar Khan this question. And he said, oh, yes, of course, this is all described in Bharat Shastra. Oh. So I looked up Bharat Shastra. There's a couple of half-decent translations of it into English. And sure enough, the whole system of rasa is described, and how rasa, or transcendental emotion, is reflected in musical vibrations, and how to tune the instruments, and so on and so forth, in all detail. And then later on, when I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam, I came across a verse in the third canto about Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma, it's described that his sensual activities are the basis of music. And the whole science of music is summed up in two words: swara, sapta. 7 swaras, or 7 scale tone ratios, which are used in ragas. And ragas, of course, are those musical constructions that express rasa. And rasa is emotion. So